The Steve Gregory era is underway for Vanderbilt's defense. They have a chance to be elite, but can they?
You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Into the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton. And on this episode, we're going to place the defense under the microscope and examine the components that make up an elite defense in this league. Vanderbilt certainly has those components, but can they execute? Can they do it? I'll tell you why I think they can. And speaking of components, JerMichael Carter is down to about 3 schools. Vanderbilt has to be in it. It's Vanderbilt, Baylor, and I think Oklahoma. His impact would be phenomenal if he does choose Vanderbilt. It's good to have Diego Pavia recruiting on your side, so buckle up for that one. That would be a playmaking receiver that this offense could surely use. And then lastly, this baseball team has to keep up the momentum as they're about to embark on a grueling journey towards postseason play. Their last bit of reprieve when it comes to game time is they play Indiana State, who is no slouch, but as a midweek game, certainly compared to next week's midweek game against Louisville, and sandwich that in with 2 series against Alabama and Tennessee being on the road, Alabama being at home. It's a tough stretch for Vanderbilt baseball. But can they do it? Yeah, I think so. They're about to show why we feel like Omaha could be a possible destination. So thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen each and every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. You can turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. So, but here's what we're going to learn more about. All right, this is science class, everybody. Break out your microscopes. Break out your little, all your little samples, all your Petri dishes, all your whatever you need to examine things under a microscope, because we're going to take a look at the Steve Gregory era defense and what we feel like it's about to become. And I'm excited for it, man. And I know a lot of people aren't, because the last 3 or 4 games of the season weren't exactly awe-inspiring when it comes to play calling and execution and all that stuff. South Carolina ran up 28 points on us. The LSU games and the Tennessee game they both got away from us in the second half, couldn't get pressure on Nussmeier and UCLA quarterback Nico Iamaleava. However, I think there's a lot of factors that come into play when you look at that defense and when you look at those performances. I think the thing you have to consider the most is the team makeup, the build of the team. There was way less depth on last year's team, offensively and defensively. Offensively, they struggled to hold on to the ball late in those games. They couldn't sustain any drives, and it was leaving the defense out on the field too much. And then the defense couldn't get off the field on third down. They couldn't help themselves. They would give up too many yards on third and long. Let's say you haven't backed up in a 3rd and 12. Well, they'd gain 13, vice versa. So offense couldn't get first downs. Defense couldn't prevent first downs. It was like it was a show. It was a clinic in complementary football, and how when complementary football is going against you versus in your favor. Whereas against Alabama, complementary football was on the flip side of that. Offense was moving the chains. Defense was getting 3 and outs. You win that game, you upset the number 1 team in the country. So it does matter. Getting pressure does matter. Getting off the field on third down does matter. Obviously it does. So, I think this defense has come a long way since then. I think roster building has been the biggest key. And I think with Steve Gregory getting his feet wet a little bit, I think he has a lot more of a comfort zone with calling the plays. I think, it's a veteran group and they know kind of what they want to do. So I think when you're game planning, when you're calling plays, when you're getting those guys into situations, I think you're going to have a scenario or 2 or 3 or 4 where it's almost like these guys are just going to react based on second nature, especially the linebackers, because I think they know exactly I think they're very comfortable with one another. Between the spring and the finish of last season, you still have Clark Lee there. He's not completely hands off this time. I think the last time he made a change at defensive coordinator, he backed off and said, hey, I'm going to let you do your thing completely, right, wrong, or indifferent. Obviously I'll step in if I need to. And I don't think he knew or was comfortable stepping in different spots. But I think this time Clark Lee's going to be heavily involved in the game planning. That's his expertise. He should be. And if I'm a defensive coordinator and Clark Lee is my mentor, or Kirby Smart is my mentor, or Nick Saban is my mentor, or whoever goes on the defensive side of the ball, if that person is there and willing to mentor me and help guide me along, and if that means them giving suggestions and calling a few plays themselves because they can't help themselves, so be it. Because Clark Lee is brilliant when it comes to defensive football. He's brilliant when it comes to scheme. He's brilliant in getting the most out of those guys. As a head coach, I think he was overwhelmed. I don't think that anymore, but I think up until this point he was overwhelmed, and he needed to step back into his comfort zone. He needed Jerry Kill there to kind of help him, and I think that was probably the best. Obviously I've said it before, I'll say it again, it's the best move he could have made. He was able to focus on defense. He was able to get a system in place. He was able to get some infrastructures in place to kind of help the defense be more successful when he has to go play head coach. So that alone, all right, we'll start at the infrastructure. I think the infrastructure is great. I think the way they're doing things, I think the way they're game planning, and the way they are analyzing. I think the analysts are doing a phenomenal job as far as getting them ready for offensive tendencies from the opponent, and making sure they understand, and making sure the coaches, Clark Lee, Steve Gregory, can anticipate what's going to happen based on the down and distance, or based on the hash, or based on the field position. And then they could also take into account based on the clock as well. So there's a lot of situations these analysts break down, whether it's field position, whether it's red zone coming out, in the middle of the field, whether it's left hash, right hash, middle of the field, whether it's first, second, third, or fourth down, the distances that go with those respective downs. I think having all that information at your fingertips, you can get a bead on what these teams are doing. You can have guys in the booth that are saying, okay, hey, Coach Lee, it's third and 4. They're gonna take a shot here because it's 4 down territory, or whatever the tendency is. They can buzz down to the coaches, and they have a great support staff. So the infrastructure is great. Clark Lee has laid out a great infrastructure that's going to help any young defensive coordinator get the information that he needs. I'm not so sure that he had a great infrastructure beforehand in 2023 when he let I don't even know his name at this point, but when he handed off the defense, that's something that was analyzed. The infrastructure, the systems in place to ensure success are there and are in place. And you can tell. I don't know exactly what the infrastructure is from 23 to 24, but I know there's a lot of things that are different. And I just know that because just the sheer fact that it's running smoother, just the sheer fact they're having a lot more success. The roster, yes, it took a bit of an overhaul, but not enough to where like you're gonna improve that drastically. So that leads me to believe that it goes beyond just the roster being better, slightly better. It goes to the infrastructure that's in place to be able to take advantage of the roster you have, attract talent to build depth, which is what they've done. Now, the depth up front on the defensive line, I think, is going to be a big help too. They didn't have a ton of that last season, and they had to use heavy blitz packages to be able to try to get to the quarterback. And when you do that, you leave yourself open and susceptible to big gains. And so when other teams started to get a feel for that, they started throwing quick. They started getting the ball out. They started running, 8-yard routes that would net them 12 to 15 every single time. They were able to take shots. They were able to do their protections a little bit because they knew Vanderbilt was going to come with blitz. So they were able to put their blitz protections in and be able to attack over the top. And so I'm not so sure they're going to be able to do that this year. I think this is this defensive line that's coming in is much more talented. The edge guys are much more talented because you add to Miles Capers. He was one of the few. Him and Nick Rinaldi were the ones getting to the quarterback. You add some pieces there as well. You add some pieces on the interior that can push the pocket from the inside, so quarterbacks don't have run lanes to step up and dart through. So I think it's going to be interesting to see kind of where these blitz packages are. I think you're going to be a little bit more deceptive with that, or you're going to be able to be a lot more deceptive with that. So I really, really, really like their ability to disguise that kind of stuff, to not have to rely on Langston Patterson blitzing the A-gap just to get quarterback pressure. He can play linebacker and do what he does. Bryce Longwell can play linebacker, do what he does. Nick Rinaldi can come off the edge, do what he does. These defensive linemen, Corday Sidnor, Zaylen Wood, Otara, and some of the new guys that are coming in, I think Glenn Seabrooks, these guys can do what they do. These guys can dominate against the run. They can push the pocket against the pass and try to get pressure that way. Now, the thought is, hey, we're going to get pressure with the down 4. And if we can't, then we're screwed. But honestly, I think it's a deeper group. So you're not gonna tire out. And it's a more athletic group, and it's a more talented group. I think there's better defensive players. So I think you're going to have a lot of success there. The linebackers are going to be able to do what their linebackers do. Now, the secondary as well. I think even though you lost a ton of experience at the safety position, I think you gain back that, or you make up for that lack of experience with athleticism. Marlon Sewell, he's experienced. Dante Carter, he's got some experience in the scheme. He just hadn't got on the field a ton, right? CJ Hurd, he has playing experience at a different place, which is good. But like all these guys are coming in and playing with each other for the first time. So there's going to be some, growing pains and some communication errors that happen. But these guys are way more athletic. I think you have true deep half safeties, deep third safeties, single high safeties. I think you have guys like Brandon Fontenette that can play down towards the line of scrimmage and really wreak havoc down there. And there's a lot of different things you can do with the secondary just based on your safety play. And then, of course, your cornerback room, it was good last year, but I think there was too much burnt toast there. I think there was a lot of miscommunication, a lot of bad technique, a lot of like getting crossed up. I think you're going to be in a situation now to where you have Martell Height, even as a part-timer, is going to be outstanding. Jalen Lackey started playing extremely well down the stretch of the season. And in the bowl game, he's going to be a factor in there. Jordan Davis is going to be a factor in there. I think there's just a lot of guys out there that can really contribute to this defense. So the question is, can they be elite? Yes, absolutely. Because they're going to be able to do the things that elite defenses do, not have to blitz. Don't blitz out of necessity, blitz because you want to. Bring some pressure because you want to, because you can, and you can be more deceptive. But the fact of the matter is this: they don't have to blitz to get pressure, and they don't have to do fancy things to get pressure and to stop the run. They can play their normal stuff, and elite defenses are able to beat you and dominate you in their base defensive packages because they're just better. They got better technique. They have a better feel of being able to call the game and put their guys in the right situation to make plays. I think Steve Gregory is going to be able to do that. I think he's had an offseason to learn with Clark Lee, watch film, break things down, break down all his calls, break down his call sheet, get with the analysts, self-scout, what worked, what didn't work, what was acceptable. And then they put a plan together, and they are obviously attacking that plan by going and building in the trenches on the defensive line with the guys that they got. I'm really excited about that. Jaden Stone, when he's healthy, he's going to be a disruptor. Mason Nelson, high motor guy, he sounds more like a geographical location, but he's going to be outstanding. So I'm really excited about this Steve Gregory defense. I think you're going to see people are nervous. I get it, because all they can think about is that Tennessee game where Nico is back there making a sandwich, asking for directions, knitting a sweater before he makes the throw. And people are nervous about that because there was not a whole lot. And I get it. And let me know in the comments if you're still nervous about that, but there's just not a lot of, not a lot of confidence that can be built from a performance like that. But honestly, the bowl game really gave me encouragement. I think having a full off season of film study and things like that, and just kind of understanding the position of defensive coordinator is going to help him tremendously. And I think I'm ready for Vandy to have a breakout year. I'm ready for somebody other than Clark Lee to lead the defense and it be successful. I want Clark Lee to be a successful head coach. I want him to do the head coach role. I don't want, I don't think I think it'll be a burden lifted off his shoulders if he can focus on the entire team, focus on building a championship roster, a championship coaching staff, and a championship culture as far as NIL brand goes. If he can focus on doing that stuff from the head seat, dude, this is going to be an incredible run. So, speaking of incredible runs, there's an incredible wide receiver that is visiting Vanderbilt. Is it enough to lock him down? We'll talk about it next. But first, did you know there's nothing like an atmosphere of an NBA playoff game with every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when the demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Here's why I use Game Time. Last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc., etc., etc. Those last-minute deals are incredible. The all-in pricing means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Hey, thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen. Thank you for being every day, or thank you for tuning in. Thank you for making us your first watch, your first listen, wherever you consume. Thank you. If you need a second listen, just look right here. Watch next. Locked On SEC. Chris Gordy does a phenomenal job there. I'm sure he's busy wrapping up all the 975 draft picks that the NFL took from the SEC. So that's going to be some exciting shows there. So make sure you're checking out Chris Gordy. Now, another thing to check out, keep your eyes peeled for JerMichael Carter. Why does that name sound familiar? Well, here's why. Because Vandy needs a wide receiver in the worst kind of way. They need a wide receiver. They need a guy that can come in and be a game breaker. Well, JerMichael Carter, 6'4", 195 pounds, can absolutely do it. He's down to 3 schools: Baylor, Oklahoma, and Vandy, not in any particular order. Didn't want to reschedule his visit with UT. This is according to 247, but he is things are up in the air right now as far as his recruitment goes. There's nobody really knows. Of course, he loved his visit with Vanderbilt, so nonetheless, he'll be making his decision pretty soon. How sick would it be if he could come in and be this, break this wide receiver position completely open? He can come in and be the X receiver that's going to take the lid off the defense. He can be the X receiver that takes the hitch and takes it to the house, that catches a hitch and takes it to the house, or takes a slant and gets a big chunk out of it. And he's the guy that I think could ignite this whole thing. He's a guy that Diego Pavia has been looking for. He wants that deep threat. Joseph McVay can be that. He's just not consistent enough. Junior Sherrill can be that. He's not consistent enough. And you're probably not going to throw over the middle that frequently. You want somebody you can push the ball down the sideline to, where if you miss, it's just going to go out of bounds. If you don't, well, his big butt is going to get up there and catch it. So I'm rooting for this. I think Diego Pavia is going to recruit this kid hard. I think there's a chance that he comes. I think it's down to Oklahoma and Vandy, if you ask me. I don't know. He's at McNeese State, so of course Baylor has a chance. But I don't know. I just don't see it with Baylor. I think they're a little bit antiquated offensively. I like Dave Aranda. I like what he does from a defensive perspective, but I just don't think as a head coach he quite understands the complexities that you need at the on the offensive side of the ball. Oklahoma with Ben Arbuckle, it's an interesting sell. And you're going with a new quarterback in John Mateer, but it's a very interesting sell. I think that would be a viable spot. I would not blame him if he went there. I don't want him to. I don't think he should, but I get it. Okay, I get it. And really and truly, Vanderbilt is the choice here because you step into a room that hasn't decided on who's going to be at that position. You're stepping into a room that, if you watched the LSU game, if you watched the Missouri game, if you watched early on in the Tennessee game, they were taking shots down the field. They weren't hitting them, but they were taking shots down the field. They hit one first play of the game against LSU. They hit one first play of the game against Missouri. They're going to throw them. And they need somebody to catch it on the other end. And I think Diego Pavia is going to have better protection. I think there's going to be a lot of things in favor here for any wide receiver. So JerMichael Carter, I think, is a guy that can be a game breaker. And if you get that on your offense, you're going to open so many doors with that. He comes in, becomes a force. You're going to open up a ton of doors just with the sheer fact that you can hit the ball over the top. Just for the sheer fact that you can play action, you can RPO, you can take a shot on a post route deep down the center of the field. You can do a lot of things, a lot of creative things with the wide receiver that can play like JerMichael Carter. That's exciting to me. And it should be exciting to him. I think the creativity of the offense is going to be a lot better. I think you're getting a lot better experience at Vanderbilt, a team that is rapidly on the rise, a team that is just itching and dying to have a playmaker at receiver. He can step in and be that number one guy right away. That's enticing to me. And Vanderbilt will pay. Vanderbilt can pay. They should pay. They can pay. They should pay. And for a guy of his caliber, maybe they will pay. So that's my 2 cents on that. But you have to just kind of take this offense and just slowly build. You have to take what you can get. It's not going to be perfect just yet, but I think if you can show this offense, hey, this is what we're missing, and you have that obvious piece, which it wasn't quite as obvious last year because they ran the ball so much, but I think the more shots they take, the more obvious it will be that either Vanderbilt can't do it, and B, if the answer to question number one is yes, they can't do it, then I'm a wide receiver. I'm going to go here and be the first to be able to actually take the lid off the defense and beat a defense over top. So, that's something that's going to help in recruiting down the road if they can get a big guy like this to choose Vanderbilt over Oklahoma. I don't think he's going to choose Baylor, but I'd be surprised. I've been surprised before. So, but speaking of surprises, the baseball team, they had a tough series. They ended it in great fashion, though, with a 13-0 beatdown in 7 innings. Connor Fennell pitching an absolute gem. They're going to have to lean on that, especially in this upcoming gauntlet of games with Alabama and Tennessee, and then a midweeker against Louisville and a midweeker against Indiana State, who's also no slouch, and you can't lose your focus there. So I'm excited about that. They're going to have to lean on that pitching, and I'll tell you what needs to happen next. FanDuel, though. That's right. The playoffs are not almost here. They are here. And FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. And please don't try to bet the Grizzlies because they are done. Right? Because right now, when you join FanDuel, you place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. And I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. All right, wrapping up the show here, Locked On Vandy. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day. Now, Locked On Vandy on all social media platforms, by the way. So this baseball team, man, they're going to have to lean heavily on the pitching. They're going to have to figure out how they can, use that to kind of buy them time for their bats to kind of be more consistent. They're just still a little bit too all over the place, especially on the road, for me to feel good about it. They're going to have to lean on Connor Fennell. They're going to have to lean on Cody Bowker, J.D. Thompson. They're going to have to lean on this bullpen. Spencer Hawks coming in and getting saves. They're going to have to – Ethan McIlvain is going to have to pitch a big inning or two in the very, very near future. Austin Nye, the science guy, he's going to have to be somebody as well. And these bats will come alive at some point. But, I think the difference between this team and last year's team, which last year's team was good. They just weren't great, and they weren't consistent, and they just didn't have the pitching necessarily to support their bats when their bats went dormant. They're better offensively this year than they were a year ago, but I think when your bats went silent, you had no answers for that. When your bats went silent, they couldn't sustain, so they'd end up losing games like 8-4 because they might pitch good the first inning, second inning, but you get to the third inning and it's like a merry-go-round. Next thing you know, it's like 8-1, and then they tack on some runs late in the game to kind of make it more of a cosmetic score. But this is definitely a case to where this year's team, they have elite pitching. So when the bats aren't working, it doesn't matter because, Connor Fennell pitched to Butte and they won 13-0 in 7 innings. So they can't win if they don't put runs across the plate, right? And so what Tim Corbett did a great job of is going out and getting 2 live arms with Connor Fennell and Cody Bowker. He needs to go get a couple of power bats that are more consistent, but baseball is an inconsistent game by nature, and it makes it tough, but it's definitely something that, this Vandy team can overcome because they have a series against Alabama coming up after Indiana State. They can't lose focus in this Indiana State game. They can't be feeling themselves after that because they still lost the series against Ole Miss. But they have Alabama coming into the Hawk this weekend. They have to. I don't want to say have to because that puts a lot of definites on it. But I think getting a series win or sweep. You want to sweep, right? I mean, of course, everybody wants to sweep. So I'm not really saying anything people don't already know or agree with. But the importance of getting a sweep this weekend against Alabama, I think you have to look at it as a chance to really, really nab some momentum because this Tennessee series, for a lot of reasons, the next weekend is going to be of uber importance because you get Tennessee at Tennessee. You get them, they just went down a notch against LSU. They have been very inconsistent themselves, and they are susceptible. And Vandy comes in. Vandy shut down Georgia, who was the number 1 offensive team in the country. They shut them down. And that was a really good thing to see. They shut them down, they fanned them, and then they were able to hit home runs. I think the confidence derived from those pitching performances really took the offense to a whole nother level. The inspiration of being able to see that Connor Fennell is absolutely dealing. We need to go put some runs up for him. They just went up there and said, you know what? Screw it. And they just started hitting the ball. They just started driving the ball into gaps. They started driving the ball over the fence. They started doing things. And they're going to be at home this weekend. So there's a chance that there could be some baseballs that leave the yard and put Tim Corbin's office under attack. And there's going to be some scenarios to where you're getting some really, really good innings out of these pitchers. And I think being able to get as much out of the starters as you can without having to really rely on dive into the bullpen too heavily, I think is good. But there's some good bullpen guys as well. And this is, again, This is a scenario to where they have a chance to do something special. Here we go. Well, speaking of something special, that's all we got for you today. Make sure you check us out on YouTube and the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen. If you are a first-timer, full-timer, loyal third segment listener, whatever you are, thank you. Good night. Anchor down and behave yourself.